Let's start with the introduction to biology. Biology had been studied by a number of scientists, a number of civilizations, the Greek civilization, the Mesopotamia civilization, the Egypt civilization, the Arabian civilization, all the China civilization, Indian civilization were dealing with the field of biology and contributed a lot. The Greek civilization also one of the most contributor and well recorded in most of the science books. Theophrastus, Aristotle, the Hippocrates, they did a lot to biology. Theophrastus do a lot of study in plant. Aristotle was dealing with plant and animals, and Hippocrates was dealing with medical aspect of biology. They were there a long time before, but the biology was not yet coined before the Lamarck arrival in the field of biology. Lamarck in 1800, he came long after the study of biology already began, and he came up with this word which is called biology. And he combined the two Greek origin Latin words, the bio and logos. Bios means life and logos means study. Now, what Lamarck has done as a French biologist is just giving a name to an older science that existed before him. That science was not then started. It was a long time before it was being dealt with, like I said, with those civilizations. Biology is one of the sister sciences of physics and chemistry, much more connected with chemistry, and nowadays there is a kind of a hybrid study of biology, chemistry, physics, chemistry, chemistry, biology, physics, biology, and so forth. But naturally speaking, when we think about biology, biology seems to be dealing with life, and its dealing with life brings about some of the rules that was set to be violated by certain organisms or certain processes of living things. Now, the violations brings about most of the theory into questions, and sometimes most of the theory were forced to be changed. It doesn't mean that in physics and chemistry such things does not exist, but the frequency and the number of existence such exceptions is so high that sometimes you call biology as a science of study of exception. What we mean by this is, for example, they may have some organisms that are heterotrophs, and some organisms that are called autotrophs. And if you, for instance, take plants, which is an autotroph, photosynthetic autotroph, that means it uses light to produce its own food or convert an inorganic compound to organic compound. And this, what we call plant, may have a member which is actually not photosynthesizing, but eating animals like the heterotrophs. Now, such a plant could be considered as an exception to the rule. There are processes that hormones are supposed to go through blood, and there are times that you can find hormones going through the axon, the fiber of neurons, and this is also one exception. So you can have a number of exceptions in terms of process and organisms in most of the branches of biology and in most of the areas of the discipline of biology. So I am just trying to emphasize that biology have got most of its rules that can be easily changed. One, two, that you may have rules and theories that still can run, but that's to give a room for the exceptions. When we come to the life, we have to have a border between the living thing and the non-living thing. We have what we call life, we have the non-life. So what do we have in the living thing? What does exist there? What are the characteristics that make group living thing? Is the question that we have to be able to answer. A living thing, we have what we call the order and organization as one characteristics of it. Order, when we say order, like the word by itself implies, there are a kind of hierarchy, series of events that really has to go through with a stepwise process, so that the ends will bring about the life existence, or the ends brings about a certain process completion or a certain process start. For example, production of energy is one of the very important processes that takes place in living thing. And the production of energy needs certain orders to be fulfilled, so that by the end of the day, an energy can easily be produced. That means an organism needs oxygen if it's aerobically producing energy. An organism needs food if it has to get the food, it has to get earlier, and if it has to get oxygen, it may be frequently with an effective process of circulation and respiration. So there must be coordination between the circulation and respiration, a stepwise process taking place at the absorption of oxygen, the digestion of food, the conversion to somewhat at some point into a state of stored food. So whenever the cell wants to produce energy, it will be nearby and at its disposal, and oxygen has to reach to the cell so that the oxygen can burn the food that is found in that cell, and allows the stepwise process starting from the reaction center cytoplasm all along the way to the matrices and the cristae of the mitochondria. So all these things has to be in a way so that it will allow life to occur. The other characteristics is what we call metabolism. Metabolism is one of the crown characteristics of life. You can say that metabolism is a kind of a combination of two types of life characteristics, the catabolism and the anabolism. Catabolism is the breakdown of large molecule to small molecule, and the anabolism is the formation of larger from the smaller molecules. It's a molecular reaction, for that matter. It is called chemical reaction, and the chemical reaction necessarily takes place within life. And the catabolism and anabolism are not taking place alternatively, they are rather taking place at the same time. That you have the large molecules, small molecules, from small molecules to large molecules, it takes place at the same time. You may have an example like what we commonly talked about, the respiration. Respiration is one of the best examples of catabolism, that it produces energy. It is a kind of exothermic, and it breaks down the glucose or the sugar or the simple sugar, which is larger as compared to carbon dioxide and water molecules, which means that it converts it from the larger molecule to smaller molecule, thereby producing energy. And actually, we are interested in the energies and the water and carbon dioxide produced as a heterotrophs actually. The other characteristics that we have is transmission of heredity. Living things has got a specific characteristics that characterize them. And this characteristics that are characterizing them has to pass from one generation to the other generation. So some smaller changes or some smaller alternations that may occur, even sometimes through the frequent period of time and long period of time, can bring about this organism into a different another organism, which we are going to be forced to call another different species. But naturally, from generation to generation, the frequency of change is so narrow that the organism doesn't change itself. The summative characteristics of organisms remain intact. So transmission of heredity is one of the characteristics of living things. They have to be able to pass on their characteristics from themselves to the next generation, and this occurs through the DNA and the genes. The other point that we may talk about is the growth and development. Yes, true that growth and development occurs to non-living things, but it's externally imposed or externally forced. There must be some external reinforcement to allow it to go through such a situation. But when we come to animal, plant and other living things, they may grow and show development. Again, it's self-induced. Actually, animals and plants and other organisms, they grow inside out. That means they first has to prepare food and take it, or they have first to digest food and take it, and through cellular processes they are going to increase their number of cells, or they are going to increase their cell size. If they're unicellular, they're going to increase their cell size. If they're multicellular, they're going to increase their cell size along with their cell numbers. So such a situation we can call it growth, and most of the time it doesn't bring about different tissues or different structures. It only allows the overall dimension of the organism. When we come to development, it's quite different. That in development, we're looking for a different situation than the previous one. A situation that are, for example, in living things that existed before, if we're going to say it's developed, then it has to change somewhat, somewhere, at some point, a certain characteristic. So, some organisms may have development later on at their after the embryonic or after the earlier developmental stage, and most of them, almost all of them, has to pass through this developmental stage, especially in their earliest development. That means when we have this actually sexual reproduction rather than their sexual reproduction, that you may easily be able to encounter into such situation in a great detail and in quite obviously understood way. It's a comprehensible way you can deal with them in a sexual reproduction. That means there is a formation of zygote, which is a unicellular, taking human beings for example, and that zygote later on, which is a one cell structure, becomes a human being of 4 kilogram or 3 kilogram or 2.5 kilograms with a number of trillions and trillions of cells. Now this indicates that there is a development of having those cells different trends and different lines of development, bringing about the whole set of me from the simple single zygote. The other thing is responsiveness. Living thing has to be responsive. That means it has to be able to test and sense the environment. Actually, the environment, living things, their need is quite not compatible, so to speak. If you take, for example, living things either they need a very narrow range or they may be tolerant to a wider range, but they're not tolerant to whatever the environment demand. And naturally, if you see environment, the environment is always changing. There is no spot of time that you have a single, simple, similar environment between seconds or minutes. So environment changes from time to time. And when environment changes from time to time, living things is supposed to change from time to time, and naturally living things needs to be into a narrow gap of situation. Could it be body temperature? It could be the concentration of solute in the cytoplasm. It could be one or another the process that takes place within itself in terms of production of hormones. The situations needs to be balanced. Now, the situation, in order to be balanced, the organism has to respond, if it's multicellular, to external and internal environment, and come up with a solution. Now, sensing the situation is what we call responsiveness, along with a kind of reaction by the living things for the betterment of itself, or for the betterment of its life. Organisms, when they are receiving an information, that information is good enough to be received by them, then that could be called stimulus. And plural, it's called stimuli. So a stimulus, to be a stimulus, has to be received by the organism. I may not smell a certain smell, but the dog can smell. For the dog, that's a stimulus. For me, it's not, because I'm not sensing it. And actually, I'm not going to respond, obviously, to such a kind of stimulus, which is not for me. But the dog is going to respond to it because it's a stimulus to the dog. So the changing environment could be considered as a stimulus. So there are like temperature, light, moisture, chemicals, surfaces, injuries, and the whole sets of stimulus can be mentioned. An organism has to show a movement and locomotion. Organisms has to move and locomote. Actually, living things, all of them do move. Those living things that does not move are maybe those which are the sponges. But the others, they do change their direction, though they are even sessile. If you take plants, for example, they do move from one direction to another direction. Whenever you're directing a plant towards a light, that plant is going to move towards that light, towards that direction. So most of the time, almost all of the time, we have organisms moving. But certain unicellular organisms and most of the animals do locomote. When we say locomote, it means that moving from one place to another. We call it locomotion. So movement and locomotion are characteristics of organisms. Locomotion is the ability that some unicellular organisms do it with their pseudopodia, with their flagella, and in larger animals like the vertebrates, you can have the wings and the limbs and all these sorts that will move the organism from a place to a place. The other point is definite period of time, or the definite period of time and life cycle. It seems quite mismatching, but these are the characteristics that exist in life. Definite period of time, that is, I am immortal means I am not a living. If I am mortal, only that I am a living. So that's the characteristics of life. If an organism has got a life, that life has to end at certain time, certain moment. Living things has to die at some time at the moment, except if there are some modifications of the genes, the aging genes is there. The gerontologists do something and they're then going to create some problems in the future. But this definite period of time, when we say definite period of time, a living thing has to stay for some known time and then die off because it's mortal. Immortality is not a living thing's characteristics. But having this in mind, you can have a human race from the time that history can record. This is because the life continues. The life cycle continues. An organism will continue this life cycle. That, for instance, you're just born, and unfortunately you're gonna get matured. You will reproduce, have a baby, getting old, and then die. So one way you're just doing the definite period of time, the other way through the process of reproduction allow the cycle of life to continue, which is not like the unicellular organisms. In unicellular organisms, you may not necessarily have to die to continue the life cycle. The other cell comes from a division. It looks like it's born. It's born. And then once it is born, it comes from the cell division. It continues to grow, involve in its activities, do all the functions it's supposed to do, and then divide. And by the time it's dividing, it's not there. The cell was not there. It's like a days. And actually, it's not actual days, but that cell doesn't exist. What we have is a new two cells that are considered as a new two born cells. So what we mean by life cycle in living thing does not necessarily involve days and separate the life cycle and the definite period of time. The other characteristics is adaptation. Again, that will take us in relation to irritability and responsiveness. If an organism is not adapted to an environment, which most of the time is not okay with the living thing, then that living thing won't stay. And it ceases to be a living thing. If a living thing stays, then it necessarily has gone through the adaptation process. It has adapted something. So if a living thing is not suiting itself with the environment so that it can stay and survive, then that living thing does not exist, or it ceases to be a living thing. So adaptation is allowing the survival of living things in a situation which is harsh. Now sometimes this responsiveness brings about, or this irritability, the ability to irritate about the environment and then respond to the well-being of itself, to the well-being of the living thing, then that would frequently happen and maybe come up into a registered chain that, every time that the living thing brings about the next generation, that next generation not necessarily has to go through it. Such a situation is what we call evolution. Evolution is a kind of a slow a long period of gradual change, which is very rare, but once it happens, it spreads so fast. And it can tell us everything about the origin of life. It can tell us everything about the transformation of characteristics from one state to another, and it can tell us also the trends of adaptation. So evolution is the slightest change. You know that there must be heredity or inheritance between living things from generation to generation. But with the fact that those living things has to survive in the upcoming environment. The upcoming environment is going to be harsher than the environment probably which is now, and that organism has to be ready to face such an environment. Evolution allows such preparations. Evolution was trying to be explained by Lamarck and Darwin, and then it is well dealt by the neo-Darwinians. The reproduction is very essential. Reproduction of one of the characteristics of life. Reproduction is a production of a game. Organisms comes into existence one way or another. Once it comes into existence, that organism has to survive and pass it on, the genetic makeup from one generation to another generation, and multiply itself. And multiply itself in space and time. And to do that, it needs reproduction as a process. There are sexual and asexual reproduction, which will help us understand this. So life has to have all these characteristics. Life has to have all these characteristics. But in short, we can summarize life into a definition that says that life is, or living thing is, highly organized, self-directing, complex system of physical and chemical structure. It's a complex system, a process, a function. Complex system of physical and chemical structure that's capable of converting matter and energy of the environment by means of, again, self-determined, self-directing, look at those words, self-determined pathways of physical and chemical reactions for growth and development. I will repeat this definition. Life is, or living thing is, highly organized, self-directing, complex system of physical and chemical structure capable of converting matter and energy of the environment by means of self-determined pathways of physical and chemical reaction for growth and development. Physical and chemical reactions, self-directing, self-determined, all these things are what we've been talking about. All right. So this is what we mean by life. Those having such things are studied or deserve to be studied under the branch of life called biology. Now, do we have only the field of study which is biology? No, never. Before even we have biology termed as or coined as so by Lamarck, we have zoology studied by Aristotle, medicine by Hippocrates, Theophrastus botany. They were dealing with those branches of biology without even calling them. So what I mean is, biology before even it is named, it has been branched out. So the branching of biology may still exist now. The very minute that we're talking, the very minute you're listening to this video, there could be a new branch of biology that exists. So from the branch of biology that exists, we're going to just take a spoon from the ocean for our label. The way branches of biology occur is actually a kind of chart-like divisions. You have the plants study and the animal study. The animal study may involve genetics, the plant study may involve genetics, and the animal study may involve genetics. The bacterial study may involve genetics, and later on we can focus on the animal study, which is first is zoology, and in zoology you have the herpetology, and within the herpetology there could be the herpetology study of the genetic study of the herpetology. So there seems to be an overlapping of the branches of biology, but whatever happens, it doesn't confuse us from having a specificity and a speciality. So it will lead us to speciality, but that speciality could be a kind of a combine of this and that branch of biology. We'll, for our label, simply go through the selected examples of basic branches of biology, and we'll try to see what they study in a kind of bird's eye view or just a fast glance. All right. We start with botany. Botany is the study of plants. Zoology is the study of general study of animals. Everything about the animal that you study is zoology. Morphology is the study of the external structure, external shapes, the overall shapes of an organism, you know, which is like, for example, that of insects, which is shaped by exoskeleton, the external structure, the integumentary structure of most of the vertebrates. Anatomy is something which is beneath the skin, between the borders. We have a border between the external organism and the internal organism, and the internal part of the organism, the study of it, whatever, is under anatomy. And when we take histology, this histology is the small anatomy. You go and study organ, that is what we call anatomy. When you go and study the tissue of the organ, then you're dealing with the histology. When we see the anatomy could be the study of muscles like myology, the study of heart, cardiology, the study of ear, otology, the study of teeth, odontology, the study of eye, ophthalmology, and the study of lungs, pulmonology. Those are branches of biology under the charts that are found under the anatomy. Cytology is the study of cellular structure or the cellular base of life. It could be the cellular base of the unicellular organism called amoeba, or the cellular base of the multicellular organism like me. So at same level, when we study, we call it cytology. When we're dealing with what is taking place and how that thing is taking place, the process of that thing, then we call it physiology. That would be the type of physiology, which means the type of the process, or the type of the system, the types of the how things are doing, the how about, you know, the things, the way it goes on, is what we call physiology. For instance, the formation of urine is studied under physiology. The circulatory system is studied under physiology. How we are able to pump out and pump in blood. How are we taking in air and out? All these things can be considered physiology. The cellular processes, the respiration, the protein synthesis, these are cellular physiology. To mention some of this are like osteology, the skeletal system, arthropology, the study of joints, angiology, the study of vascular system, the circulatory system it could be, neurology, the study of nervous system, splancology, it is the study of the endocrine system, visceral system, this is splancology is the study of visceral systems, the systems that takes place with kidney, liver, and pancreas, those visceral organs. And for instance, if you take human beings, and lots of the organs of the snail is, for instance, visceral, that means most of it will be considered to be studied under splancology. Endocrinology, the study of endocrine. We also study about food and feeding, or eating, or the process of getting food. So that's what we call nutrition. So what are the combination of food? What are the chemical substances called nutrients of food? How do they proportionally exist to a certain specific demand of an organism? This is what we call nutrition. Especially when we focus on feeding, much more specialized into a field of biology which is called dietetics. It's also possible to have nutrition not as a branch but as a process. We can talk nutrition as a process. There are things about genetics. What is going on from one generation to another generation? Why that character is passing, why not the other character is not passing? Why after 2 generations it appears? Could I have a desired characteristics of living things for me? Can I have this characteristics and avoid that one? This is answered under genetics. You desire certain characteristics and you know, engineered such organisms so that they will bring about the desired characteristics. That's studied under genetics. Taxonomy or systematic, this is nothing but grouping, you know. Grouping is always simplified, aids the work of others. For instance, if I am trying to sell clothes, it would be wiser to put the clothes according to their nature, fashion, models, and sexes. The male, the female, the young, the old, all these things, if they're grouped, to pick it out and sell it, and for the people even to look and see and take what they want. Taxonomy or systematics aids the situation. So taxonomy or systematics is nothing but an arrangement of organisms starting from the very interbreeding organismal group to a layer of genetically related, physiologically related, morphologically related, anatomically related organisms, and thereby grouping them into a larger group, finally which ends up into the biggest group called living things. Ecology is not fixed to the living thing alone. It's not even talking about the living thing. It's talking about, or it is a study of the relationship. What are the relationship between those organisms that will help them stay? What are the relationship between those organisms that disturb the whole ecosystem, the whole organization that we were talking about earlier, the life organization? What is there then that the non-living things put on the living things? What is there that this living thing is supposed to adapt, is supposed to suit with the non-living things? What could probably cause the extinction of such and such organisms? What brings about the reproduction of such and such organisms? Why those organisms are, a great many, while those organisms are wiped out? What is the environment contributing to the organisms? What is their relationship between the organisms and the environment? All these things in terms of the organization too is studied in the ecology. So it's about the home, the archeos, the home which is the big home that we have, the earth, the mother earth, and what is taking place there in terms of living thing relationship among themselves and with their environment. The other branch of biology, like the life characteristics, is evolution. Evolution is the characteristics of living things that the living things has to undergo so that to adapt certain future situations, certain future harsh environment, and come up with a desired characteristic that could be selected by nature. And not always that happens. Sometimes evolution brings about the disintegration and extinction of organisms by spoiling an advantage characteristics to be a disadvantage. Sometimes it becomes disadvantage, sometimes it is advantageous. Whenever it's advantageous, it allows the continuity of that species. Embryology is quite a different study of development. It is the determinant stage of the development of living things. At this stage that the living things is the basic, fundamental set up for it takes place, and it's very sensitive. It needs a lot of precautions from the organism side, and this embryological development we call the earliest development of organisms is part of kind of separately could be studied from the extra embryology development of the organisms, and such study is called embryology. M means in and embryo means swirl, that whenever it's taken from the mammal's pregnancy, and it's taken from the development of a seed, from it is an active stage to active state, that the seed becomes swallowed by the process of imbibition or the taking up of water. The other field of biology is paleontology, which is called palos, which is called fossil or ancients. Paleontology is not archaeology for that matter. Archaeology deals with what has happened to the early human beings, what had they left to us, or what is they left to anyone. But paleontology is dealing with life. What are the organisms living long time before now and actually not existing now? Or they may be closer to having one sex these days, which is not yet dead, but most of the time they are not existing. And dealing with them, studying them, will give us a clue. The origin is the origin of life. It gives us a clue, the ancestor of the living things. How do they develop from one to the other? And this is what we call paleontology. Pathology is trouble. Whenever there is a problem of creating one organism to the other organism, it's a trouble, it's a problem. And that's what we call disease. When a bacteria creates hard time to me, then that bacteria is creating disease. And the study of that specific bacteria is what we call pathology. The Mycobacterium tuberculosis is not doing anything wrong. It's just trying to eat my lung up and survive. But doing so, I'm losing my lung. So I'm having a problem. I call it disease. And the study of disease is what we call pathology, the characteristics of the symptoms, the nature, the causing, everything about that disease, except the statistical data of that disease as to how many people are dead and how many people are alive, how many people are infected. This is, of course, not studied under pathology. This is studied under epidemiology, the statistical data, the prevalency. Then we have the parasitology. Parasite, para near side place, so it's near and necessarily closer to a certain organism place. It's dependent on the organism. When one organism depends on the other organism at the cost of that organism, then we call it parasitology. Actually, most of the parasites are part of the study of pathology. So those disease-causing organisms that are getting closer, and we will focus on their symbiotic relationship, close-up relationship that they do have with the host to which they are creating a problem, to which they are creating disease, is what we call epidemiology. The other one is economic biology. Whenever something is of importance in terms of commercial, it's a cash generating stuff that's relating to biology, then that is going to be called economic biology. It's essential, it brings some money, it's a money-making biology. Actually, most of the branches of biology are money-making biology, but this is directly related with selling and buying. Biogeography is the distribution of life based on the geographical landscape or the geographical setup of could be plants and animals. The other branch of biology is exobiology. It is about the study of life where life is not expected to exist. Beyond the atmosphere, life is not expected to exist. Beneath the atmosphere, all the hydrosphere, the atmosphere, the lithosphere, most of the spheres that we have on Earth, one way or another, starting from bacteria, they are there to carry on life. But when we think about those which are found in the space, which is above the gravity, away from the gravity of the Earth or beyond the atmosphere, then that study is called exobiology. Like, for instance, we expect life to exist in Mars. Such a situation, that field of biology could be exobiology. Gerontology is another branch of biology that was trying to find out why living things are getting old. I think it's trying hard to work on to remove one of the characteristics of life, which says definite period of time. And this is what we mean by gerontology. Ethology is the study of the characteristics of living things, except human beings, because human beings are much more product of their learning Of course, there are animals which are the product of their learning, but when we come to what we call ethology, this is a field of science which is dealing with non-human animal behavior. There are also branches of biology that are much more applicable, or they're applied biology, like agronomy, dealing with the study of crops and soil, pharmacology with pharmaceutical products like drugs, horticulture, dealing with the study of gardening for beautifying or for food, silviculture, dealing with forestry management, pisciculture with production of human consumption marine animals for human consumption like fish, crabs. Apiculture is the study of what we call bees for the sake of their production of honey. Sericulture, dairy, it goes on the list. So you can find a number of branches of biology in the books, and they are telling us something of the branch of biology. You can have them, about 90 of them there, and they're well studied. The next point is biology as a scientific methods. Biology is like the other sciences. It is a discipline that has to be done with scientific methods. There is a need of scientific methods. You have to have a scientific methods to deal with biology. So what are the scientific methods in biology? That will be the question we're trying to answer now. It is quite difficult to have a fixed steps of scientific methods, but all the scientific methods, one way or another, they have similarity. Could it be, it could be, say for instance, scientific methods in social sciences, the scientific method in natural sciences, like what happened in physics or what happened in chemistry. The scientific methods, the stepwise process, much more are one way or the other alike to one another. But I prefer this steps of scientific methods, which is step one is raising a question. That means you come up with a certain observation, or you think about something, and then you observe about something, and then that will trigger a question in your mind, and you start off with that. You start with a question. When you start with the question, for sure you look for the answers, and before having the answer, you're going to go around and collect some informations, and they're not just an information that are thrown every left and right, but an information that could be an answer to your question that you've already raised.